Welcome to the Justice Journal podcast. I'm Sacramento County District Attorney Anne Marie Schubert. I hope you enjoy this podcast series where we discuss important public safety issues and provide insight into who we are as an office and what we do both in the courtroom and in the community to provide the highest level of public safety through prosecution, prevention, and innovation.
Welcome to the Justice Journal podcast. I'm Shelley Oreo. In this episode, we will highlight another example of how the District Attorney's Office and law enforcement agencies partner with community organizations to improve the lives of individuals and create healthier, safer neighborhoods. Today, we will feature the local community-based program, Brother to Brother. I'm joined by Brother to Brother co-founder Mervin Brookins, along with District Attorney Anne Marie Schubert and Sacramento Police Chief Daniel Hahn. Welcome, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for being here.
Mervin, I'd like to start with you. Can you please tell us about yourself and about Brother to Brother?
Well, sure. Thank you for the invite, first of all. Happy to be here. My name is Mervin Brookins. I'm a native of Sacramento, specifically North Sacramento, Del Paso Heights. Graduate of Grant High School, Pacer for life, of course. Grew up in typical neighborhood, typical environment. Shortly after high school, made a series of poor decisions, which unfortunately landed me on the wrong side of the law and ended up in prison. Served my time, came home, been home over 10 years now, and just try to contribute back to my community in any capacity that I can. About 8 years ago, I started working with Councilman Warren to bring back some of the youth programs that we had when he and I were growing up in Del Paso Heights. So we reestablished Grant Little League Baseball, then moved to Grant Junior Pacers Basketball. And a few years ago, I partnered with Mutual Assistance Network to establish the College and Sports Academy, where we offer all Grant youth sports, football, basketball, baseball, as well as academic tutoring and summer camps. It was during that process that I started working a lot with the siblings of the young kids that were in our program, helping them identify resources, community resources. Most importantly, helping siblings that were coming home, making a transition to linear society and just overall family resources. And from there, I started meeting wonderful people like
Go ahead, say it.
District Attorney Anne Marie and Chief Hahn. So I was doing that, and there was another gentleman named Larry Craig who was doing similar things that I was doing, and Dr. Gina Warren, who knew both of us, said that we should come together and make this formal, and that's how Brother to Brother started.
So what exactly does Brother to Brother do? How does it help, and what services do you provide?
Primarily, we're a mentoring program for at-risk youth, and generally anyone in the community that needs help. We try to be there and support them in whatever capacity we can, whether it's an organization or individuals themselves. We work a lot with, oftentimes we're thought of as a youth mentoring program, but we work a lot with the older men in the community as well to help them get their lives on track, connecting them with resources that they have that are available that they may not know about. So we pretty much, whatever capacity we're needed, we just try to fill in the gaps.
Anne Marie and Chief Hahn, I'm going to bring you in at this point. I think most people know who you are, but if you can just introduce yourselves and then talk about how you met Mervin. How did you cross paths initially?
You want me first? I think most people know me. I'm lucky enough to have this job as the DA, but I've been, my whole career, almost 30 now, has been in this area of prosecution. Love my job, but I've also come to realize over the last 10 years or so that we cannot expect police and prosecutors to solve the problems we face as a community, that we have to have our community involved as well. So that's how I, have come to respect people like Mervin Brookins and the work they do in the community. So I think we've developed a good relationship.
How did you first meet Mervin?
Why don't you tell them, Merv?
Well, when Anne Marie first ran for office, she was doing the Meet the Community events, getting to know the community. And she came out to Jubilaire Evangelistic Church and had a town hall. And at the town hall, Pastor Walden and myself and some other individuals asked her a few pointed questions. one of which was, would you be open to having public input on different cases that came about? Would you have open door policies? Would you allow our voice to be heard when, situations arose? And she said, yes, she would. And one of the things about our community that we have a bad habit of doing, we ask for things and then don't follow up. But in this case, after she won her first reelection, I followed up and reached out to the district attorney's office, and true to her word, she had an open door policy and took into consideration everything that we brought to the table. And from there, the relationship just grew. It wasn't spontaneous, but whenever we needed to reach out, she always answered the phone and allowed us to come in and be heard.
And Chief Hahn, briefly introduce yourself and how did you come to know Mervin?
Yeah, I'm Daniel Hahn, obviously. I was born and raised here in Sacramento in the Oak Park neighborhood and saw a lot of things growing up, one of which was a homicide, and my younger brother was murdered in Sacramento as he got into the drug trade. I was arrested when I was 16 for assault on an officer, and I really became a police officer by accident, really. I was going to Sac City College, and my goal was to get a degree in business, start my own business, and become a school teacher. And so I accidentally got into the police department at 19 because it paid more than I was making at Florin Mall at the time. But what convinced me to stay as a police officer actually were two jobs. One, I was a pop officer in Strawberry Manor up in the North area. And I realized I could do things as a police officer that I never thought I could do, and primarily working with the community. And then I got a teaching credential and taught at Grant High School for 3 years as a police officer. And at that point, I decided to stay as a police officer. And in 2017, I was sworn in as the police chief. I don't actually remember how I actually met Merv the first time, but he doesn't. I'm not the only one in the police department that has a relationship with Merv. A lot of people do call him, or he calls them. If he has an issue in the community with an incident or a person, he has several phone calls that he can make either to the captain in the North area or to Vance Chandler or to myself, and he uses that regularly. But I have plenty of examples where he's helped in the community. We have a lot of great organizations in the city of Sacramento. Brother to Brother is absolutely one of the best. And one of the reasons why I think our relationship is so good is because he and Larry and the brothers and Brother to Brother and Sister to Sister have proven over and over that they care about what's best for the community. So whatever that means on any given day, that's what they're willing to do. And it hasn't come without pressures, but they're steady. And so I highly respect people that care about this city and are willing to do whatever it takes.
Can you all give an example of how your relationship and partnerships have helped each of you and your organizations from your different perspectives?
Yeah, I can go first. One of the first times I know I worked with Merv was we had a shooting in the North area where almost 100 rounds were exchanged in the middle of the street. Nobody was arrested, nobody was hit, but clearly it appeared to be a gang-related issue where people were shooting rounds off in the middle of the street. That was like a Thursday night. And the next night it was football season. So the next night was a Grant football game. And if you know Del Paso Heights, it's what I hear about like towns in Texas where the little small towns shut down on Friday nights when the football team plays. That's the way Del Paso Heights is. And there's a lot of rivals.
Is that because of violence that erupts?
No, it's because of the football game. Everybody's at the game. Grant football, as you heard Merv say, Pacer for life. Grant football is a big deal in the Heights. And so, but there are some rival gangs that are all in the same area. And being that there was a gang-related shooting the night before, we could put 60 cops at the game, and Twin Rivers Police Department could put 60 cops at the game. I guess if we could scrounge up that many cops. But I knew one of the best solutions was Brother to Brother. And so I called Merv, and you don't really even have to tell him much detail. You just say, hey, there was a shooting, which I'm going to guess he already knew. And I said, we got a football game tomorrow night. We can't let the kids' game get interrupted, and we can't let violence. And so they brought out all sorts of brothers that night and nothing happened. And so I think there's a good chance something would have happened at that game had they not been. The latest example, it's got a little bit of angst in me when I say this example, as Merv said, Pacer for life earlier. Well, I went to Sac High. And so I guess I'm an adopted Pacer for life, but I'm truly at the core a Dragon for life. And so Sac High was playing Grant in the playoffs. And it's the most packed I've ever seen Grant's gym, which was pretty awesome. They're like, you watch these videos of back east where the way the basketball is, and it reminded me of that. It was probably over capacity. Well, it was over capacity. Glad the fire department didn't come and shut it down. The referees had some issues. But there was a lot of concern because of the rivalries between Oak Park and Del Paso Heights of potential violence at the game. And so I went out there and first of all, I had trouble getting into the game because it was already packed. I was a few minutes late. But nothing happened that night. It was a great environment, awesome environment, 2 different neighborhoods coming together to support their teams. The wrong team won. But the reason why it was successful is I didn't see hardly any officers. I didn't see any officers inside the game other than myself. But what you saw at every single door were about 3 or 4 brothers from brother to brother, letting people in, and they have the respect of the community. They have the respect of the players and the parents. And it was just an awesome environment. And I would say, primarily because brother to brother was there and the respect that they have and the history that they have and the people that they have. And that's regular for, I'm sure Merv could tell you more, but when the principals and vice principals at Grant High need some help, they call brother to brother. Wow. And that's what they did that night. And they were like basically the de facto security for the game without having to be actual security.
So it's the community, which is Mervin and brother to brother, sort of policing their own community without having law enforcement having to be involved.
Right. And that doesn't include the mentoring and things that they do on a proactive way to ensure people are successful in the community. But those are just 2 of the latest examples I can think of.
That's pretty powerful. Mervin, from your perspective?
I remember that night. It was a beautiful night because Grant did win. But I don't recall the specific case that we were working on. There's an issue in Sacramento. I don't recall the specific case, but where I remember meeting Chief Hahn is when he was with Roseville Police Department. And anytime there was an issue with officers in Sacramento or a case in Sacramento, and the community would try to come together and figure out, well, what do we do? How do we move forward? Somebody would make the call to Chief Hahn. And maybe it was Daryl Roberts or Kim Davey, but he would always be there. He would always come and dressed as a civilian and be there as a former member of the community, not in his capacity as police chief. And to me, that said a lot, that he's willing to give his time to come and lend whatever expertise he could to the situation. And he was always able to give us information that showed us how to move forward. And that's where I remember developing a respect, meeting him and developing a respect for him. Years before he became SAC police chief, he was already, it's like he never left the community. And he came back in his capacity as a community member. And to me, that just spoke volume about him.
So give us an example, Merv, of how your relationship with Chief Hahn or Anne Marie or our offices, how that's helped you, if you have a specific example.
Oh, my goodness. I don't even know where to begin. Building the relationship, well, let me say, I don't ever know of a time when the community has had the type of relationship that it has with the district attorney's office. I've never known of a time where we've had access to not only the district attorney, but the chief district attorneys and supervising district. Anne Marie has really opened up the office to the community and said, we are a part of you and that we're just not here as prosecutors. And the same is true with the police department, despite the recent tragedies and some of the animosities that are going on. There's never been a time that I know of, and I'm 52, there's never been a time that I know of in Sacramento history where the police department is so open to say, hey, no, we want to be a part of the community. So one of the things Brother to Brother's role is bridging the gaps and building relationships between law enforcement. And to have access to Anne Marie or have access to Chief Hahn to say, hey, these are the people that we're working with, it gives us credibility with the community, that they know that we can sit down and talk with the people who are running things. And so it is kind of, it's difficult to explain what the relationship means, but for a community that has lost faith in the system and are discouraged, disenfranchised with the system, to know that we have the relationships that we do, they respect us more. It gives us more credibility, and it feeds both ways. I like to say we're credible messengers, but to be credible messengers, you have to have access to institutions that we ordinarily wouldn't have access to. So just being here and having this type of relationship, I don't know what you call it, huge kudos in the community, but it definitely gives us credibility. It's funny that attorneys that are career attorneys in Sacramento, defense attorneys, they will call me to ask me to introduce them to Anne Marie.
Wow.
And I just get a kick out of it. I really do. Say, hey, can you get a meeting with, and sometimes I never even tell her about it because I know that oftentimes it's for personal gain. So I don't tell her about it. And I don't because I know she knows that I'm not going to come to her with things that I don't believe in. But I actually get a kick out of it that attorneys will call me to get to her. And
let me add another thing. You mentioned the personal relationships between Anne Marie, Merv, and myself, and there's definitely those, and I believe there's a lot of trust in there. But I also know that the secret to moving forward is not just the personal relationships between 2 or 3 people. It's really systemic relationships where, right now you can have people like a Vance Chandler that Del Paso Heights trusts a lot because they've seen him, they've worked with him. He brings out his officers when he was in patrol to build those relationships. And we've always had that. Every neighborhood, whether you go to Meadowview or Del Paso Heights, you'll always find a community that completely trusts and believes in a particular officer. But you ask those same people if they believe or trust in the police department, they will also say no. And so it's interesting that you can trust in the person that wears that uniform, but you don't trust the other people that wear that uniform. And so I think the trick is that we have to make it to where you trust that patch on somebody's shoulder. If they're wearing that patch, you already trust them and they have to lose that trust to not have it. It's the reverse now. And that's the other thing that I really appreciate about Brother to Brother and Sister to Sister and Merv specifically is they work on building that trust outside of just me and him, or Anne Marie and him. They come out to the academy and talk to the recent graduates with, the last time they did that was about a month ago. And I like to call some of these guys, they're Del Paso Heights famous. And yet they're standing in the academy telling brand new officers about their experiences, how they got into the game and what got them out of the game and how they want a relationship with the police department to build the experiences of the officers and of theirs. And as a matter of fact, today, this afternoon, we're taking Brother to Brother and some of their youth and their programs out to the academy to put them through scenarios and show them what kind of training officers go through and let them experience walk in an officer's shoes as much as they can. Because only when we expand our experiences outside of what our own personal experiences were, can we start making the changes that are needed to make everybody feel valued and know that it's a privilege to work in neighborhoods like Del Paso Heights. But an officer on a regular basis typically goes from bad to horrific call to bad to horrific call. They don't typically meet Miss Johnson or the Merv Brookins in the world. And so you can start to have a belief that Merv Brookins, the young Merv Brookins, could not be the old Merv Brookins that's here today because of the things he did when he was younger. But if you met him today, you'd be surprised. Matter of fact, he wears a suit and tie when he comes out to the recruits. And so they all think he's some businessman or some, and then he tells his history and they're shocked that he did things like that or was in trouble the way he was. I believe he does that on purpose to show people that, looks can be deceiving and you got to get to know people. So.
Right. Thanks for making that point. So it's not just at the chief and the DA, but it's throughout the organization that you need to build that trust. Join us for our next episode where we'll continue our discussion on how Brother to Brother is working with the DA's office and law enforcement to turn lives around and improve the community.
Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. You can find all of the Justice Journal podcasts on our website at sacda.org, iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube.